All right, so here I am sitting in a tree near my starting point. And the first thing we need to determine, actually, before we get into any details about the zipline itself, is what is your starting point? Is it a man-made structure or is it a tree? And if it's a tree, how big is it? So the first thing I'll say is that most structures, other than maybe a house, but even then, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't attach this to anything other than a tree. You can install certain, like a telephone pole, and then kind of do some special slack lining to brace it and all that kind of stuff. You can do that. I mean, if that's all you have and you really want a zip line, by all means, all right? There are ways to do that. This is not a tutorial about that. Generally speaking, you're looking at 2 trees that you want to have a reasonable, like the right distance apart that you want to use, and each tree should be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 inches in diameter. Now, my starting and end point trees are a tiny bit less than that, but I guarantee you there's no safety issues here. These are live trees in excellent condition, and they don't even really bend, even when an adult goes down the zip line and kind of hops up and down on the line itself. It doesn't really move or do anything. So it's not a horrible thing to have. You know, you can fudge the rules a little bit, but that's the general rule, is about 12 inches. All right, so if you don't have a tree that's 12 inches in diameter, and it's a little bit less or maybe quite a bit less, and you really want a zip line, that's okay as well, but you got to have a slack line or 2, which is just a reinforcing cable that goes behind the tree. It pulls the tree in the opposite direction that the tree would bend when someone's on the zip line. It would be best if you could attach it to another tree, especially near the base of the tree. That would be really secure. But you can also use different anchors that you can put in the ground, and you know, they're okay as long as you do it right. But this video doesn't really cover that. All right, this is assuming you have 2 trees, and we're just going to install the basic zip line. So there's a really easy way to figure out the percentage of your slope. All right, it's basically universally a good starting point is 6%. All right, so that means that if you have a 100-foot run, which I do here, I want my starting point to be 6% of that distance higher than the end point. So, for example, 100-foot run, 6% of 100 feet is really easy, right? It's 6. So that's 6 feet. So I wanted my end point to be at about 9 feet from the ground, because that allowed for people's feet not to drag on the ground when I get to the end of the run. So that means if the end point is at 9 feet off the ground, I needed to add that extra 6 feet to my start point, which of course brings it to 15 feet. So I'm sitting up in a kind of like a mini tree fort now in this tree, where the starting point is 15 feet off the ground. Now, not to complicate things any more than I have to, but there is a little bit of extra consideration you might want to think about if your ground is not level. So you can't just measure 9 feet off the ground over here and then 15 feet off the ground over there like I did. That's easy. But what if your ground level is different at your end point than your starting point? Then you've got to put that into your calculations. All right, so that's available online. There's a lot of places that will let you know some of those calculations, but it's a little bit beyond what I'm doing today. Most people have a fairly even yard, and if not, that 6%, guys, even if you do have an uneven yard, you can experiment a bit. I did. I was actually about a foot off. I was too low, and I raised it a little bit more than 6 feet because I wasn't going fast enough on the zip line. So you don't really have to get as much into the math as you do maybe a little bit of experimenting, and you can save yourself some crazy math and be even more precise than using a formula. It's how it works in real life. That's what you need instead of a formula. The formula is just a starting point. Okay, so here I am at my end point, and you can see right here, there's a chain going right around the tree. All right, so pretty simple. You don't need to know too much more than that. But I've got, to protect the tree, you can see I've put chunks of, they're actually more than just bark, but it's like a pine tree bark. You can just use a 2x4. I just had some of this lying around, so it matched these these pine trees. So anyway, that just protects the tree from chafing and you know, possible damage from the chain. But anyway, so that's basically that. Now, as you can see, right in here, the chain comes together, and there's a turnbuckle connection here, and just a bolt that goes through. Pretty simple. And here is the turnbuckle next. All right. Remember I said that you're going to need a 12-inch turnbuckle? That's the size of this guy here. So he's pretty big, and of course you want it open as wide as it can go. Now, if you don't know what a turnbuckle is, it's basically just a tool or a piece of equipment that when you turn this center section, you put something in between here, a piece of metal. I have a big, like a nail, a very large nail that goes through, and you turn it. And as you turn it, it either sucks in each of these ends or pushes them out, depending on which way you're turning it. So in other words, it's for tightening things like cable. It's a perfect scenario. So at the other end, what you see, this is kind of important here. Here's the cable, and it goes around the turnbuckle through here, but you see this little thing here, that's the thimble that is in your kit, and that just keeps the cable from totally crimping at any point. So it just follows the thimble nicely. So it's not 100% necessary for function, but anyway, it's a good thing to have. It's available in kits. And then I have 3 cable clips here. They're about 6 inches apart. 6 to 12 inches is a good sort of spacing. And all I did was put the cable through the end here, wrapped it around the thimble, and then just screwed these things down. They pinch the cable like this together. So that's what's going on. And there's the end of the cable, and there is a right way of doing it, and that is, see where the cable is? This end, this side, the end is right there. You see it sticking up there. So on this side, you want to put the screws on these clips facing the opposite way, away from that little chunk up there. So they're facing down, right? You see that? I don't know why that's super important, but that's what everything I've read online tells you to do. So anyway, that's all I did here. And this is not tightening it. I didn't tighten it. I had this turnbuckle was open as wide as it could go. So these these bolts that go in, you couldn't see this whole section here didn't exist. It was unscrewed all the way to here. And these things were way out here because I ended up tightening it later, but not yet. Not when you install this end. You keep it nice and loose, and the cable now, it's installed now, but when I first put this in, the cable was just lying on the ground, all right? So that's how you install on the end point. Now gets the good part where you gotta tighten the cable from the start point. And because the start point is 15 feet off the ground, you can see there I have built a ladder, and the ladder goes up to a small platform here that I'm standing on in the tree. It's necessary to get high enough to start the run. All right, so here's the good stuff. Up here is the main part of the trunk that has the cable wrapped around it, and as you can see, I've got a couple of 2x4s that I've nailed into the tree. That won't hurt it, and that kind of protects it from, or protects the tree from any chafing and tightening of the cable. It wouldn't probably hurt anyway, but I just thought I'd throw them up because I had some 2x4s sitting around. Now let me kind of move around here. And so one thing to keep in mind is that you can actually have the cable going right through the tree. You can drill a bolt right through it with a huge washer on the other side. Some people say that actually hurts the tree less. I don't know about that because I'm not really doing any hurt to it now, but anyway, neither here nor there. So here we go. What I did now, the other end is kind of attached, the end point. So here I just, as you can see, I've just wrapped the cable around the tree, and here's these 3 clips again. These ones are a little farther apart. There's 3 of them. You can see them there. They are there's a good view of one. You can see how it crimps and holds the cable together. And the takeaway here is that I got 150 feet of cable. I only needed 100, but the extra cable, you can see it's coming down here, and it actually, I've got it rolled up there. Now, see that extra cable? I found a good use for it. What I did was I had my wife and my son pull on it as hard as they could down there on the lawn. Okay, it's just near the base of the tree. They were kind of hanging out right down there, and they were pulling this end of the cable as hard as they could. And while they were pulling this, I was actually pulling the main cable towards the tree trunk, while they were pulling this away from the tree trunk, because it's the other end of it wrapped around the trunk. So we were both pulling to the same goal, and we got it tight enough that I could apply one of these clips. I actually applied this one first, and then that was enough to hold it. And then these two are just extra. You can see how it's really crimping it there, right? The cable. And so, you know, it's holding tight. And then this one was easy too. And as I slid this one further towards the tree, it tightened the cable as well. So it looked fairly reasonable. The cable went across. You can see it there. It was fairly tight. It had a little bit of a sag in it, but it wasn't tight enough at that point to ride on. And that's when we had to go back to the start point and turn that turnbuckle. And that's really what tightened it. And to be honest, guys, that is the end of it. That's all I did. It was ready to go.